So look, if you want to grow your wealth, your income, and increase the amount of time off, then these are the shortcuts that can help. Welcome to the Wealth Creation Podcast. Hey everybody, it's Dan Latto speaking. Welcome. So we were testing out some new technology yesterday. It didn't quite work on the podcast. So we're still having to edit the podcast because the stream didn't go through. Honestly, when you buy stuff, why can't the thing just bloody work? Anyway, in today's podcast, we're going to talk to you about investing versus speculation. Good morning, Julia. Hope you're well. Thank you for joining. We are well late this morning. I've got an itchy nose. It's 8:30 in the UK. We're about half an hour behind. Anyway, hope you're well. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about investing versus speculation. And it came back. I was watching something on TV, and it was to do with gambling and putting a bet on some horses or something like that. And I said to my wife, I said, did I ever tell you about the time when I took the biggest bet? So I used to work at a bookies, believe it or not. I used to work on the phones in a call centre at a well-known bookies in Leeds. Not a little shop or anything like that, but like a big call centre with like 200 people in the room, all taking bets over the phone. When the Grand National came up, I mean, it was so busy, you'd work so hard. And actually, that formed part of my second job. I'd have one job working at a kitchen company, and the second part-time job was getting there and working 6 till 10, 6 till 11 sometimes, 5 nights a week, and then on Saturdays and Sundays. So I was always working 2 jobs and working a lot of hours, doing the traditional, thing where you're transferring your time for money. And it wasn't a lot of money I was transferring time for. And then I got educated, and I got good at sales, and then I moved into sales, and then my income turned into being paid for what I was good at, not for my time. But it was a very interesting time working at that place. I read an awful lot of books because often it was quiet, and it got really busy coming up to a race or a football match, and it got really quiet again. So I'd read lots and lots and lots. And everybody would be having a go at me because we're spending all my money on books. And, but obviously 26 years later or so, maybe a bit longer, that all paid off, believe it or not. But I remember this is what I was saying to my wife, I remember taking a bet. And I said to my wife, can you guess what the biggest bet was that I ever took in my life working at this bookies? And I'll tell you, it was such a large bet that we had to put it through twice. So the amount was £133,000. It was such a large bet, they had to put the bet through twice. They put £99,000 through, because that was the maximum. Right, this is off the guy's debit card. Right. He was a regular. He spent a lot of money on bets. 99 grand through, and then we had to put £34,000 through for just to get the bet through. Obviously, it then had to get referred. It then got referred up, and then I think it got referred to a third level. Like any large bets had to get referred. This guy was a regular, and I can't remember the exact bet, but it was for a football match, and it was 13-8. So for every 130, so every 130, or so every £13 he put on, he would make £8. Obviously, this guy was putting £133 on. He would have made about 80 grand tax-free. Depends if you pay tax up front or not, doesn't it, really? I can't remember if he paid tax up front. Can't remember. Probably not, I'm guessing. And he would have paid tax on those winnings. Anyway, that was his bet. And he won. And I was like, whoa, maybe that's what I should do. Whoa, hold your horses. Hold the on. Maybe that's exactly what you shouldn't be doing. And I remember thinking at that point, because I knew, you're in that environment, aren't you, where people are gambling and people are making an awful lot of money. And of course, what you don't see are the losses, and you don't see the lifestyle and the anxiety and the stress. And I'm not saying that you can't make money as a professional gambler, but the clue is in the name. But one of the things I did learn, by the way, was that a professional gambler knows when to take their money off the table. They know when to go, okay, I'm done, and walk away. And the unprofessional gambler, the amateur gamblers, the people who make a lot of losses and it ruins their lives, they're the people who go, just one more bet. So what has this got to do with investing? And what has this got to do with gambling? And what is this investing versus gambling? So the difference there's two differences between investing versus gambling, okay? And there's two words I'm going to use that are going to change a gamble into an investment. Because I see this all the time. They talk about property speculators. I've never speculated on a property in my life. Never, not once. In 20 odd years being an investor, I've never speculated, I've never gambled on a property in my life, right? What I've done is I've invested in properties. I've bought properties, I've done them up and I've sold them. That's an investment. That's an investment in turning one piece of capital into a bigger piece of capital. And the thing that makes a difference between calling it an investment and calling it speculation, two things. The first one is education, right? I knew what I was doing because I've done it so many times before. I knew what I was doing because I'd read about it. I started off small. I bought a house, I did it up and sold it. I bought another house, did it up and sold it. I looked on Rightmove and I knew how much houses were going for. 3-bed houses in that postcode area were going for this amount. I'd watched all the programs on TV. Do you remember Sarah Beanie's, whatever it's called, and House Doctor? Do you remember that one? I watched all of that stuff, right? And by the way, I'm not saying that was my only education, because watching House Doctor is not your education if you want to get into being property. And Sarah Beanie's thing, again, honestly. And by the way, some of these Muppets that were buying this stuff in those, if they could have bought it, trashed it, and the price would have gone up. Because in those days, prices were going crazy. You know, they were going up percentage points a month. But the education comes from knowing your market, knowing your psychology, knowing not to buy just the first thing because you got $5,000 off, but knowing to look at the property in its environment and knowing what that property is going to go for, plus knowing how much stuff was going to cost. So when we would walk in to buy a property, we'd be looking around the property and we'd be pricing everything up. So we had a clipboard with a spreadsheet written on it and a pen, and we'd go, how many sockets in the front room? Oh, only one socket in the front room, so we're going to need an extra socket. And we'd work out, I don't know what that'd be, 200 quid, whatever it is, right? And then we'd look at all four corners and go, well, it looks like there's some damp coming in here. So then we'd go outside and we'd look at the gutter and you see water coming down and go, okay, now we need to look at the roof. Is it a new roof? Is it just the guttering? Is it wall ties? And we'd get people in to look at that and we'd price it all up and we'd know before we were going to buy this thing how much we were likely to make. Now, that bit right there, likely to make, you might say, well, that's speculation. You don't know how much you're going to make. And you're absolutely right. But it's not gambling on red or black or trap 5 or football team A or football team B, where I've got zero control over trap 5, football team A, which on the roulette wheel, which colour it's going to land on. I've got no control over that. So actually, there's probably 3 things we should include in here. The first one is education. The second one is control. What can you control when you're putting a bet on something? Like if I'm putting a bet on Bitcoin, which is what Bitcoin is, it is not investing. And you shouldn't use that word for investing because I cannot control Bitcoin. Now, you might also, by the way, say the same about stocks and shares. I can't control Amazon, so why would I buy Amazon? Well, I can't control Amazon, but I know what the returns are likely to be, right? Do you see the difference? Now, there's a fine line between speculation, gambling, and investing as far as I'm concerned. And it comes down to these 3 things. First is education. The second one is control. And the third one is experience. And obviously, the first time you go out and start doing this, you haven't got any experience. No one has experience to begin with. But that's why we call it experience. You've got to get experience from somewhere. And at first you might be speculating. And then as you get better and better, based around your knowledge, based around what you can and cannot control, then you're moving in towards investing, not speculating. And for me, that's the difference. I don't want to be putting 50 quid on black or 50 quid on red. I don't want to be putting £100 on trap 5, where they feed the dog lots and lots of food so it can't run, right? It's a well-known trick of the dog races. You're putting something in the food, and it's the same with horses. I've got zero control over anything that happens. Maybe the jockey. I wanted to say a pilot then, but it's not a pilot on a horse, is it? Maybe the jockey went out on a lash last night, did some MDMA. I don't bloody know. I don't know what these jockeys get up to. Some growth hormone. I don't know. So people, by the way, always used to say to me, "You're a basketball player. I think you picked the wrong sport." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should have been a jockey because I'm short." So, but I've got zero control over any of these external events. When I'm buying into property, when I'm going into buy to let, I know what the return is going to be because I can go on Rightmove and go, look, this one bed flat, this studio flat in Leeds City Centre, that I'm going to pick up for 70 grand. I can get £550 a month for that, guaranteed. Worst case, 525, maybe worst case, absolute is 500. But for sure, I know I can get 550 on there. Okay, what's the mortgage going to be at this interest rate? I can't control interest rates. So I have to build a buffer in there. What is the service charge going to be? What's the management charge, if any? What's the electrical installation certificate charge, if any? What are the gas, what's the EPC cost going to be? What's the smoke alarm and the CO2 detector cost going to be? What's the cost of refurbing it every 5 years? I can put all that into a spreadsheet and it will spew out and it goes, ping, buy it or don't buy it. That's not speculation, that's investing. And it comes from those three things. I can control my education, but I have my education. I have control because I can see the control because I can either sell it or keep it, or I can make it really, really nice, spend a lot of money doing it up and get the best tenant, or I can just leave it for a bit, maybe not get the best tenant, but get someone who's still paying $500 a month. What is it? I've got control over this asset. I've got control over whether I decide to do this place up so it keeps tenants interested or not. I haven't got control over what's going on external to the building. I just read something about a property developer who's been taken to court because he's literally just pulled down a forest. What an idiot. He was going to do it. He's pulled it down. He's applied for permission. He's not got permission yet. And he's just totally taken his forest down. And the people who bought houses then are complaining, quite rightfully so, because he's just totally ruined the forest. And now, if he doesn't get planning permission for it, I don't know what he's going to do. Build a forest? I don't know how he's going to do that. But he's going to, I reckon he'll go bankrupt. A lot of investors do this, by the way. They do the work without getting permission, knowing the permission's coming, which is just crazy in my book. But that, for me, is gambling right there. Because there's an external event that he has no control over. It's not one of mine. But he has no control over because he's got Bob from planning, whose wife just left him last night, and now he's coming in and he's ready to smash an investor in the face. And you come in and you just knock this forest down and he's going to screw you over, right? That is speculation right there. That's not investing for me. You can't go around doing that kind of thing. If, however, he ran all his numbers, went for planning, got the planning, then knocked the forest down, that now turns into investing, not speculation. The same work has been done, okay? But there's those three differences that I mentioned right at the start that are in place now. You've got education. The education being, I've now got planning permission to knock this forest down. You've got control. The control is, I've got this bit of paper saying I've now got planning permission. Whereas before he had no control because he didn't have a piece of paper and they could have said no. And then number three, he's now got education. He's now got experience. So now he knows next time exactly how to do this process. I mean, trust me on this. If this guy doesn't get planning permission, he's going to get educated and he's going to get experience and he's going to lose control because he's going to be in prison, potentially. Excuse me. There's a certain level of control in prison and then there is a lot of non-control in prison. Any shower scene you've ever seen on TV is a lack of control. So I've got no story about that, actually. So we were playing basketball, and one of the teams that we played against was Armley Prison up in Leeds. It's the first time I've ever been in prison. Hopefully the last. So we went to play the team. Needless to say, they don't have away games. All the games are at the prison. So you go into prison and there's Alsatian dogs and big gates, and it was just like Porridge where it clanks shut. You know, do you remember Porridge where it took with Ronnie Barker and it clanks shut? And we go in, and he goes, all right, lads. And he takes us into the changing rooms. All right, lads, I'm just going to leave you in here. I'm going to lock the door so you're safe. And we're looking at each other going, okay. Takes us in the room, locks the door. And as we look over, there's three guys just coming out of the shower. And I'm looking at my mate. My mate's 6'5" at the time. And I look at him going, we've seen this film. And they get out, they get dried, and then they put on their prison uniforms. They were wardens. They were prison wardens. Prison officers, I should say. We were like, oh, phew, thank goodness for that. we thought we'd put us in with some cons, for goodness sake. Anyway, we went out and we played basketball, and it was lots of fun. And one of the other funny things about that is when you play basketball, you play a lot of street ball and a lot of basketball outside, and you get to know lots of people. And as the other team come out, you're like, Jeremy, is that you? There's people that you know coming out. It's just a bit weird, quite frankly. Anyway, so back to investing versus speculation versus gambling. So the difference for me on gambling, like, let's take a professional gambler. Has he or she become educated? You see the poker players on TV. Are they educated? Hell yeah. They are very, very, very educated. Have they got control? Well, they haven't got the same amount of control that I would like. But this control really comes down to risk. What's your risk adversity? What's your level of risk? And if you've got a high level of risk, then if you've got the education and you want to be a professional poker player, and you're a professional poker player in Leeds, by the way, he made some money, you know, and he made a living off it. He wasn't wealthy, but he made a living off it. And that's my worry about professional gamblers. Do they become wealthy, or just spend it all on the next gig, if you like, rather than investing in property or stocks and shares and that kind of thing? Anyway, are they educated? Yes, absolutely. Have they got control? Well, they've got some level of control that aligns to their level of risk. So not enough for me, but enough for them, fine. And have they got experience? Hell yeah. I knew another friend of mine, and he spent all day long playing poker online, and he had a lot of experience. He had a little bit of control there, but not a lot. But he had a lot of experience, and he was killing it. And when I say killing it, he was making a living. He wasn't wealthy, but he was able to cover his costs and have a bit left over. And he was just playing suckers that came on, didn't know what to do with a bit of money, and just it would, you know, it'd be taking £5, £10 per game, but he'd be doing 6 games an hour, which is not bad, 60 quid an hour. So for him, it worked. He had education because he knew what he was doing, but he had no control, but he had experience. For me, I want all three. When I'm looking at investing in something, I want all three. Warren Buffett doesn't invest in anything he doesn't know, although he did invest in Apple, which is now sold. But, you know, think about it. Coca-Cola, Heinz, like he's got 87 different things that he's investing in right now. He's gone down as low as 3 individual asset classes, individual investments that he's made at any one time. But he's now like on 87. But he wants stuff that he understands, he's got control over, and he's got experience over. And that, for me, works really well. As you're looking at, do I go for Bitcoin? Well, how much have you read about Bitcoin? Other than in the Daily Mail, Daily Express, even the FT doesn't understand the Bitcoin. Do you understand what blockchain is? Do you understand how blockchain works? Do you understand why blockchain works? Do you understand what the future of blockchain might hold, right? If you don't know any of that, you shouldn't be gambling in Bitcoin. Have you got any control over Bitcoin? You've got zero control over Bitcoin, okay? So that's a negative. Have you got experience with investing in something like Bitcoin? Cryptocurrencies are very, very new. They've not been around very often. So the answer is no. What the hell are you doing putting your money into Bitcoin then? You're going to lose it. It's gambling. What are you gambling for? What are you doing? Like, unless you know all of those 3 things, let's take a business. What business are you going to do? Well, I'm going to buy and sell cars. Great. How much do you know about cars? Well, I put my key in and I put my foot down and it goes. Probably not that much then. You need to reconsider maybe getting into buying and selling cars. This is not to say you shouldn't ever do it. I went into being a letting agent with no idea on how to be a letting agent, okay? But I knew I had control, and I knew I had experience because I was been renting out my own properties for 10 years, maybe 8 years, 6 years, 8 years before I set it up. So I had some level of experience, okay? But I didn't know what I was doing, and I hit the books, and I read and read and read, so my education started going. But if you're setting up a business doing cars, have you got the education? Have you got the control? Yes, potentially. There's some aspects or elements of non-control. A head gasket blows, you've got no control over that, so you're into speculation there. Have you got experience? Well, have you worked for a car sales company? Yes. Oh, okay. So actually 2 out of 3 is not bad. Maybe, I would say 2.5 out of 3 is where you want to be on this. If you've got no education about a certain thing, that's all right to some extent. If you've got half an education and you've got experience, by the way, if you've got experience, you've likely got education, right? And if you've got some level of control, so the gamblers are probably 2.5. The professional gamblers, have they got education? 100%. Have they got some control? 50%. Have they got experience? 100%. So it's 2.5, right? So you're looking really at 2.5 out of 3. And if that's what you've got, then that's what you should be using to move forward with. All right, I hope that's useful for you. A good take there on investing versus speculation. There is a good chance we might not be running the podcast tomorrow, but we'll see. We're away for the evening because we're still in Easter holidays here. So we'll see. If not, then we'll catch up with you on the next day. Other than that, I hope you have a wicked day today. My name's Dan Latto, and I'll speak to you on the next one. Take care. Hey, it's Dan here. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Please click like or subscribe to the entire podcast.